Hello everyone, this is the Baylor Breaks It Down channel, and we're going to do a crash course into Apollo server because that is what you do when you want to use GraphQL. Seriously though, Apollo, the team, they do a lot of work for GraphQL in the community, and their packages are just awesome. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build a basic schema, and we're going to connect to the SpaceX data because that's just awesome. So let's get started by creating a new directory called our SpaceX Client, or let's call it SpaceX Server. And already I'm kind of excited because this just feels like we're building a SpaceX server. And it's cool stuff here. So what we're going to do to get started is just point this out. I'm running node 10.15.1. This is only necessary just so that you know that you can use any version after this and it should work, guaranteed, probably. So just so you know, that's the node version that I'm running. It's probably not the latest, but it's close enough to being new-ish. So we're going to say npm install, and we want to install Apollo server, GraphQL, and node fetch. And so we're going to install these. And this is going to pull these packages down from the internet. And as you can see, Node is pulling everything. Oh, that was quick. Okay, cool. So now, if we list our directories, we have a package.lock and a node modules. And we're kind of missing a step here because I didn't actually create the package.json to get those packages saved, but it's going to still work, and it's close enough to being perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by putting most of our code in index.js. And I'm doing this because I want this to be simple to follow. And it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but it's an easy way for you to kind of see an isolated example. Watch me do this from scratch, and then you'll know how to implement this and build it into something awesome, like a true SpaceX server should be. This is a toy version. And we're going to get started by saying we have a const here, and we're going to call this Apollo server, and we get this from the Apollo server package. And we take this server, this class that Apollo gives us, and we're going to define a server, and it's equal to a new Apollo server. And we're going to say that we want this to listen to port 4000. And when it starts, we want to pull out our URL and just log this to the world and say, what's like a flight thing? Like bon voyage? I can't spell that. Bon voyage? Huh? You have started your Apollo server and here we're going to put in our URL that we just got. And we can't start the server just yet because Apollo, if we do this, if we run this index.js with our node, it's going to say you must define a schema because Apollo is a GraphQL server and it needs a schema. And so to get that schema, we are going to, you know what, I'm going to keep it all in this file just so we can see it easier. We're going to import our GQL, and this is a JavaScript tag. What it allows us to do is we can define our type defs, our definitions, and this is going to be equal to GQL, and we're going to use this fancy syntax where we can say type. We're going to define like a query type. We'll start with a hello. We'll say it's a string. And what have we done here? Because this is very special. What we've done is we're defining a GraphQL string. And this GQL tag is just a JavaScript thing to do something super fancy where it takes this magical string and it turns it into an object, essentially. Or not essentially. But what we're doing is we're defining a query type, which is GraphQL requires a query type. It's one of the root types. And we're saying that it has this hello field. And that hello field is a string type. And the bang here is saying that it's required. So we're going to take this type def and we're going to hand it to our Apollo server by saying type defs. And now if we start our server, you can see it says bon voyage, which is probably, that looks right. You have started your Apollo server, and if we open this up in Chrome, you can see that we have this super cool GraphQL Playground. This is way beyond where it was a couple of years ago, and you can see I've kind of already got a little bit going on here. If we look at this, you can see on the right we have our docs. If we open this up, you can see that we have on our query types this hello, and it's a string type. And if we go to our query, which usually it starts like this, and you type out query braces, and if you hit control space, it'll pop up and it'll say, what do you want to do? And we'll say we want hello. And if we command enter this, you can see we get an error, and it says we can't return null for a non-nullable field. And that is because, as we defined it, if we go back into it, we said that hello is a string bang, which means it can't be null. So what we need to do is we need to add our first resolver, and this is super simple. We're just going to define that we have resolvers, and we're going to basically build this to match our query schema. So you can see our type definitions up here. We have a query type with a hello property. So we're going to define our resolver as query, and it's going to have a hello. And we'll just say this returns back a hello, YouTube viewers are awesome. That's a shout out to y'all, because I am very appreciative if you're watching this video. So if we try this again, we get, what did I do? Hello. Oh, we've defined our resolvers, but we haven't actually added them to Apollo server. So we need to come down to our server and we need to add our resolvers. And for those of you that caught that, very good. Awesome. So, as you can see now, when we run our query, which is query hello, we get back our data and our hello and our string message. And this is cool, but it's not exactly SpaceX worthy. So we need to do that. And we're going to do that by adding we're going to change this up. Let's get rid of this whole hello thing, because we don't care about hello world applications in a crash course. In Crash Course, I didn't think about, that's probably not a great title for a SpaceX server, but we'll ignore that. So what we're going to do is we're going to define that we have rockets. And when we ask for rockets, we want an array of a rocket type, and it can't be null. And in fact, we'll do bang bang array bang 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 array bang. Basically, we're saying we can't have nulls, like it has to be an array, and it can't be any of the objects inside of that array can't be null. So we're enforcing types here. And so we'll define what is a rocket. And you are probably thinking the same thing I'm thinking, like, well, what is a rocket? It's essentially, we'll go to Wikipedia. I'm just kidding. We're going to use the SpaceX data. And you can go to the docs here to see the documentation, or you can do what I like to do and just try to go to rockets. And you can see rockets here. So we're going to grab just this first part of the URL here, and we're going to put that up here at the top, called API base. And that gives us the base. Oh, we didn't finish defining our type. We want to have the rocket ID, so we'll say rocket ID. If we look at that, it looks like a number, so we'll say it's an integer. We have ID, which is a string. We've got the name of the rocket, which is also a string, and we'll do active. Active is a Boolean. Okay, so this gives us a little bit to play with on our rocket type. So we need to resolve these rockets, and I've kind of gone ahead and skipped this because I wasn't thinking straight or clearly or in order, and I've already defined this constant API base. And so we're going to go into our resolvers, and we're going to say that for our rockets, because this name matches this name here, we're going to have a get rockets function. And it's going to be an async function called get rockets. And what I want to do is I'm going to kind of write out the code that we want, and then we'll write the code that makes it actually work. So what I want to be able to do is say I want rockets to be an await a API client dot get rockets, and I want this to return those rockets, but I don't want to I don't want to work with the data raw. I want to work with an object an object that wraps our rocket. So we'll have these rockets. We're going to map over each rocket, and we're going to say this is going to be a new instance of some rocket, and we're going to pass our rocket into there. Okay, cool. So none of this is going to work, and if we try to run it, we're going to get an error because it's going to say query field. That's gone. Rockets. We're in the cool part of this video now. You don't know my query. Here we go. We have rocket ID, we've got name, and we've got active. And we try to run it, we get API clients undefined. So let's start at the top and work our way down. Okay. Oh, and you know what? Yeah. We're going to have a class. We're going to call it API Client. And we're going to have just our async. No, it's not. We're just going to have our get rockets here. And we're going to return fetch, which we don't have. So we'll say const fetch equals require node fetch. And so we're going to fetch from our API base plus our /rockets. And I looked at the documentation, so I got some of these endpoints, but all we're doing here is we're just taking this v2 and we're adding /rockets to it. So this gives us our rockets, and we're going to take this response and we're going to say it's JSON. And we know it's JSON because when we use this in Chrome, it's coming back as JSON. So we know that we can take this response and we can convert it to JSON. And if we also notice, it's giving us an array, and that allows us to call our .map when we get that data. And the next thing that we're missing is we don't have this rocket object. So we're going to create another class for our rocket. And on the constructor, we're going to take in our rocket data. And we're going to set this .data is equal to our rocket data. Okay, so what have we done so far? Well, we've defined this getRockets function that is async. And we use this async keyword so that we can use the await keyword. And we do all of this because it allows us to not have to keep putting in thens and callbacks and waiting and blah, 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 blah. We can just say, hey, this isn't going to give me data back right away. I want to block until that data comes back to me. And it allows us to write very clean code here without a bunch of callbacks. I hate callbacks. And so we do it this way, and that means that we have our rockets call an await on our API client to get rockets, and then we take these rockets and we map over them into a new rocket object. But our rocket object pushes this into this .data, but that doesn't tell GraphQL or our Apollo server how to pull out what is the rocket's ID or the name or the active. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to define properties called like rocket ID, and we're just going to return this .data.rocket ID. And we'll do another one, get ID, and we're going to return this .data.id. And our name, and you can see what we're doing here. We're defining the API data name. We're defining our public accessors to how we access this data internally. And so we're going to do the last one, return this .data.active, and this should be it. So if we run this, I'm going to explain why I'm doing things the way I'm doing them also in a minute. API client.getRockets is not a function. Oh, we never initialized. So let's change this. Let's call this our SpaceX Client, and we'll come down here and we'll say const API client equals a new SpaceX Client. Not Python, node index. Okay, let's try it again. We got data. hey, this data is live. This is coming straight from SpaceXData.com. So you can see this is starting to work, and we're starting to get something that looks cool. And now I'm going to explain kind of like why and what we're doing. So I kind of explained that we're mapping our rockets into these instances of this rocket class. And the reason I like to do this is this is a very very direct mapping to what SpaceX gives us. And like, in fact, like me personally, I don't like this rocket ID lowercase like this. I prefer to not have to question, figure out why do we have rocket ID and all that. But I'd like to change rocket ID to be rocket ID with a big I. And we can do that here. We can change this, like this .data.rocket ID. This is going to the data schema that's defined by SpaceX. This public property here, this get rocket ID, this is Baylor's schema. And so I can change this to make it make more sense for what I'm trying to, like this is a pass-through API essentially. I can make it make more sense to what's going to be using my version of this, right? So I can change this and have casing that A, I prefer, and B, makes more sense for what I'm doing. It also makes this very easy to test. Like, we're not going to get into testing, but if you look at unit testing as you start learning, and you see this class is super easy to test because you pass an object in, and then you start calling these getters on this object, and you just make sure the data comes back out like you expect it to. Very, very easy. And so if we run this again, if we refresh, you'll notice that our rocket ID is now missing. GraphQL Playground is giving us a suggestion, and it is the right suggestion. And so we can run this again, and now we have rocket ID. And it's just mapping on through to this rocket ID that's spelled funny. So the next thing I want to do is, I noticed that the endpoint has launches. And these launches, there's a lot of data here. But one thing we can do is you can say that I want to look at a particular rocket. So we can look at rocket 2. And now we're getting only the launch information for this single rocket. And so we're going to set it up so that we can come in here and we can say, I want to see the launches, and I want to see the mission name. And if we do it now, you can see, well, we have no launches on rocket. So we need to go and define all this. So we'll hop in, and we're going to go and define on our rocket that we have a launches. That's an array of launch, bang, bang, bang. And we'll have our launch type. And we're going to say this has our mission name, and it's a string. And so we'll start kind of at the bottom here. I'll go ahead and define this class for our launch, which, let's just see how many times I can spell that like that. That makes me feel good. And I'm going to replace rocket with launch, which I still can't spell. Ugh. Okay, launch. Okay. And we're going to have our get mission name. Now, here's the thing. If we look at this data, mission name is spelled with an underscore. And JavaScript likes camel casing. And so this is another example for a good reason why to create these mapping objects, is because we can say this.data.mission underscore name, but we can map it to the JavaScript friendly mission big name. Okay, so how do we get these launches on our rockets? Well, we're going to go into this rocket object, and we're going to have an async launches, and we're going to use our API client. So we'll say const launches equals API client dot get launches. Launches. I can't spell it for nothing. Get launches for rocket, and we're going to pass in this dot rocket ID. And we're just going to take these launches. Oh, I need to await. Await. And we're going to map over each launch into a new launch. I still can't spell it. It's really embarrassing. Okay, so the thing that we're missing now is on this API client, we don't have our get launches. Baylor, get launches. Okay, so I hope you're kind of keeping up because Baylor can't type tonight. Well, past my bedtime. So it's understandable, I think. Maybe not excusable, but understandable. So we need to define how do we get our launches for Rocket. And we've kind of seen this already because we saw that if we put this URL in, that we get our launches by Rocket ID. So let's do that. We'll go over here and say get launches for Rocket. We have our Rocket ID. And we'll paste that in, grab this, paste it here, and we'll just fill it in. So launches Rocket ID equals. And here, I'm going to make it so I can do string interpolation and Rocket ID. I think that's right. I'm not really into computer science, so just kind of like, I kind of make up words or I don't make up words. I use words that I've heard before by other people that are actually computer sciencey people. So string interpolation. I like it. If I ever have a child, I'm going to name him Interpolation. I think it sounds cool. Okay, so that may not be very nice. I had to beep that out. Okay, so we have our get launches for Rocket. We pass in this .rocket ID, so we're using our helper method that we've already defined for ourselves. And we call this get launches for Rocket. We have this abstracted away, so our actual Rocket class, our get rockets function, has no idea how to actually access data. We're using this SpaceX Client. And if we run it now, and we come over here and do this, you can see we get non-nullable field mission name. Mission name. Mission name, this data mission name. Uh-oh. What have I missed? I'm noticing I'm like hunching over more and more, and I apologize if it kind of annoys you because I can totally understand that. I'm reading through the code that I wrote earlier, and I don't know what I missed. Get launches for Rocket API client. We're using the same API client, right? Yeah. Maybe I'll do this. Console.log our launches. We just want to see what we're getting back. Run it, and we got back data, and this data looks like it's the same thing. We got our mission name here, so we're close. We take these launches, we map over a new launch. The launch has mission name and mission name, mission name. What did I miss? What's going on here? Const y equals return y console.log y. Y is not there by accident. What is this? Yeah, you can see we have our launch data. So we're super close. Get mission name, and it matches this data mission name. Mission name. This is horrible. We get to the last step and it doesn't work. Did I call new? New launch? Yeah. Const y squared. Return y squared, but we're also going to console.log y2.map x dot mission name. You see Baylor debugs this way. Undefined. A bunch of undefineds. Mission name. Let's look at data.mission name. So it's not null there. Baylor Ray, if you saw that, congratulations. Put it in the comments. If you saw this, put it in the comments and let everyone know, like, totally missed this. We need a return here. I write Ruby most of the time. Ruby does this by itself, and Ruby does a lot of things people don't like, but that one, pretty good. And now it's working. All of that to just have my mind just like for nothing. And so let's kind of review, because I feel it's unfortunate that we sat there and like spun our wheel. It's inclusive here. Everyone. I can't accept all the blame. So let's kind of start at the top. We are pulling back our Apollo server and our GQL tag from our Apollo server. And the reason we can do this is because Apollo server packages, let's say, half a dozen packages, and it combines it into one thing so that you don't have to understand how to use all the configuration to make things work. And so it's beneficial here because we don't have to try to pull the GQL tag, and we don't have to try to pull Express and all these other things for trying to render the HTML. We just say we need Apollo server and GQL. And then we use node fetch here because node doesn't have the built-in. It doesn't have a way to actually make HTTP requests in a sane way. And so we use this so that we can make it match what we do in the browser and actually implement this quickly. And so then we have our constant for our API base, which we won't talk about that. But if you do, we can make a follow-up video and we'll talk about it for a minimum of at least an hour. So after we have that, we go into our type definitions. And so here we're just defining our root query type that tells GraphQL what endpoints or what fields do we have so we can share the data that we're collecting. We have our rockets here as what we're returning for our only field type. It's an array of the type rocket. Here we've taken some of the endpoints or some of the fields or properties that are available to us through the SpaceX API. We've made a change to it here for this rocket ID. We've also introduced this launches array so that we can pull it all in one go. And then finally we have our launch type where we've pulled out the mission name. The next thing we've done is we've introduced this SpaceX Client, and this allows us to use these endpoints without having to hard code any of this data in our application code. And if we had to unit test this in the future, we could stub out this SpaceX Client here, and we could have this get rocket return something different, and then we could test to make sure this is working without actually having to hit the internet. And then we get into our ORM-ish type state where we're wrapping these raw data fields that are provided to us through the SpaceX data, and we're wrapping them into something that gives us, as developers, a place to go and review what's available and also make minor changes such as casing or adding more data so that we have kind of an easier way to work with it. And then finally, we glue all these parts together. We initialize our SpaceX client, we define our entry point for getting rockets, and we define our resolvers to tell Apollo how to take these type definitions and convert them into real data. And then finally, we define our Apollo server, we start it, and we let everybody know, particularly ourselves, that it started. So I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel because it means a lot to me, and I'll see you next time.